Hi, this is Shelly at IAB Tech Lab. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Rendez-Vous with IAB New Ad Portfolio. Uh, Good afternoon to those joining from the West Coast, late good evening to those on the East Coast, and good morning to our friends from Asia. Welcome, and let's get started. So one of the main questions that I get is kind of a chicken and an egg situation, which is really great because people are really thinking about how this will all get implemented. It is a bit of a radical shift from the current display ads specifications. And we've designed this whole webinar to kind of address that question on how you can get over this vicious cycle of chicken or the egg comes first. And based on that, the agenda today is, of course, the introductions, which I'm going through right now, and I will introduce the speakers as part of that, and a little bit about IAB Tech Lab. Then the next first thing what we wanted to address was the transition period. We know that in the whole ad tech ecosystem there are multiple components. There's the publisher sites to start with. There's the ad server, and then there's measurement reporting, etc., as well as the advertisers who get the ads built. And they have their own vendors and they have their own teams that build the ads. So we wanted to address that upfront, like what you can do while all these pieces fall in place, because there are many parts in the new ad portfolio that can be taken up and implemented right away. Then we'll address the ad server question, and then we'll get into more details on, specifically talking about flexible ad sizes, the lean guidance for page load performance, and the lean guidance for user experience. So that's the agenda, and we have a fantastic set of speakers today. Most of them have worked extensively in the past 1 year, very closely with IAB on this working group to define the specifications that we released. Our first speaker is Anthony Yam. He's the Chief Product Officer at Spongecell. We have Paul Vincent. He's the CEO of Flexitive. We have Matt Snyder. He's the CEO of Responsive Ads. We have Sam Lowe, who's the Director of Creative at Flashtalking. And we have Aaron Karp. He's a Product Management at Google, and he's also in charge of the DFP ad formats. So with that, just wanted to talk a few things about IAB Tech Lab, if some of you are not aware of what we do. So basically, IAB Tech Lab works on standards, specifications, and protocols like the New Ad Portfolio, MRAID, OpenRTB. We also develop software tools and code libraries to support standards. We recently released the Open Measurement SDK for in-app measurement as a limited release. And then we also offer services, which is compliance and certification for standards, and organize events like these for education. All of this we do in supporting to build a trustworthy and effective supply chain, and informing and enabling better ad experiences, and also to simplify and standardize the measurement. And our current focus is very heavy on the growth that's happening in mobile and video. So with that, I want to ask Anthony that, like I mentioned, there's this chicken and egg thing, but there are a lot of parts in the portfolio that publishers and advertisers can implement right away. So Anthony, what can publishers and advertisers do in the transitioning to the new ad portfolio? What is it that they can do now?
Hey everyone, yeah, this is Anthony from Spongecell, yeah, the other presenters are going to get into more details around the new ad portfolio, but the portfolio is working in conjunction with the lean guidance. So yeah, so some of the things we can do are already we're posting new file weights for the existing ad units as well as for the new ones. So trying to create a great experience for people that are viewing the web and viewing the ads. So keeping the file weight to these new guidelines that we have here. There are as well like number of requests that you can make and limits to the initial and subload, which we'll have more detail on later in this presentation. And then just the ad units that are actually allowed to run, that's also changing as well. So some ad units are being decommissioned and some are going to be transitioned over time. So definitely take a look at that specification and the transition guide. And then, the next thing is not only the ad formats, but the types of experiences that are allowed. So, a lot of research has been done here on what consumers like to see, what they don't like to see. So, just some examples would be, the pop-ups and push-downs and things like that. Autoplay video with sound. These are things that, in the wrong contexts. So we have guidance for all of that. So that's all going to, again, be part of the new ad portfolio, but even existing ads can start to move this way today, including using shared libraries. These are common pieces of code that can be downloaded and hashed, so that helps improve the experience. And then with audio and video, we just want to be polite to the users while giving a great ad experience.
Well, thank you, Anthony. And like Anthony said, like all of this information is available in the new ad portfolio specification guide, as well as some of it is repeated in the transition guide to help you map things that you can transition to quickly and right away. My next question is about flexible ad units. This is the area where I receive most of the emails on, how do we transition to a flexible size units? What happens to this unit? And, how do I make it work? And many other questions. So I want to ask Paul, who's CEO of Flexitive and was very active contributor to the new ad portfolio while we were working on it. If you can walk us through on how publishers can plan to transition to the flexible size ad units. Paul?
Thanks, Shirley. So one of the most important things that I think publishers need clarity on is just that the flexible ads initially, they aren't in the programmatic space. So initially, we were recommending that we sell them directly. So through the original process outside the programmatic ecosystem. We think that over time the flexible ads will be introduced to the programmatic ecosystem, but this is the best first step to get these flexible ads on the publisher's sites pages, and then it'll form the impetus for moving into programmatic. So one thing that we recommend is possibly just taking it one at a time, especially your first one. So this isn't about necessarily doing your whole network at once. It's about starting with one and taking it from there. So and also have a plan for your transition so that you're prioritizing the ad units that you want to transition one by one. And that may be because that may actually involve adjusting the ad units on your page or removing ad units that were poorly performing or had a poor yield. One way that we think could be a good way to start is to start adding a new ad unit in previously unmonetized space. So an example of that is on desktop sites. As screen resolutions have increased, there's a lot of white space on quite a lot of viewers' laptops or computers. So that could be a good way to have net new revenue, and that it's a good thing for publishers. And the other option is to transition existing ad units that you have as well. So one way that a good analogy is in the past when the industry moved from a 300 by 250 to a 300 by 600 or 728 by 90 to a 970 by 250, a lot of publishers used their existing ad service. So in DFP, for example, you could serve either of those sizes depending on what had been sold, and then that placement is just sharing the overall inventory available for that spot. So we can use that same approach as you introduce the flexible ad units. So for example, if you're transitioning a 970 by 250 to the new flexible 8 by 1, you could have both of those, or basically the 970 by 250 backfilling that 8 by 1 placement. So just a couple other things just on how you can approach it is with your existing site, or actually consider this as part of upcoming site redesigns. So that's a major opportunity to really think about implementing the flexible ads, because they actually can help influence the way that you may design your site in future, rather than having to fit these old fixed sizes into your publisher site.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, just to add to that, and then in the transition guide, we've explained like how you can use the current DFP as an example setups to enable once you have transitioned or created a flexible ad container. I'll get into more details on that. We'll go through a live example for that. So let me just switch from the PowerPoint to the browser. And here, so this site is going to be very helpful, and we're going to keep adding more things to it as we get more questions, and we feel that there's more information needed. But this is kind of a portal that we've created for guiding publishers, and all the information is accessed through this, as well as we've created all the demo pages. So I'll just quickly walk through this. Once again, I'll repeat the URL. It's easy to remember: flexibleads.iabtechlab.com. On the left side, we have some publisher information, which is publisher ad slot allocation techniques. So we've got a whole example, whole definition of how this is done. And then we also have a GitHub repository where we've put this as an open source that you can download, and helper code and samples of testing and using the new flexible ad formats. Please feel free to use this. And if you're implementing this, this can be very helpful. And let us know if you have questions or if you have issues. You can always reach out to us at IAB Tech Lab. Then what we have as part of our testing before finalizing the specs, we did test everything, and especially keeping in mind the transition period, that if a publisher transitions to a flexible ad unit, they should be able to accept both flexible ads with the new formats, as well as the older fixed size ad formats, so that there's no disruption in revenue. And some of these examples I'll walk through quickly is like, for example, this is an 8 by 1, completely flexible. As you can see, the HTML5 fixed container is fixed, whereas the flexible size is flexible. And similarly for the images, also we have in the transition guide as to how you can create a code snippet to enable a flexible static image ad on DFP, and this is examples done using that. I'll show you one more example on the mobile screen. So this is for the mobile, for the 6 by 1. And again, the same thing. So we have examples for aspect ratio based HTML ad, a fixed size HTML ad, a aspect ratio based static image, and a fixed size static image. And they all use the exact same container that was designed to enable flexible ad. We also have some examples from actual publishers who helped us in testing period. For example, this is from Journal Media, and this is a responsive ad example. And this is an actual real page that they use today for all of their media. And then we have other demos that we created for to demonstrate an ad within a content page, a typical content page. So using a Flex container. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of this page that we have created, which has all the information, which has all the demos to help you get sample codes, so help you see how things are implemented. And these are all running live examples from DFP. I'll switch back to the PowerPoint to continue with the rest of the presentation. So the ad server is kind of at the heart of the digital advertising ecosystem. This is where we schedule ads. This is what is used to serve the ads. We get our tags from the ad servers. So that has been one of the key questions that I get in emails that, what about the ad servers? When are they going to switch? So we were happy to engage with Google on that, and Aaron Karp from Google was, thanks to him that he wanted to come on this, and he's actually addressing this project or managing this project and this product changes at Google. So Aaron, do you want to go ahead and tell them about what Google's plans are and what to expect?
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for joining. The number one thing that I wanted to say is that Google is invested in this. We're excited about flexible ad sizes. We have been making flexible ad sizes available for a number of years in a few different ways, particularly via our native product through DFP and AdX. We've seen that flexible sizes, full width edge-to-edge ads on mobile in particular, don't just look better and are easier to traffic, but can often perform better as well. So we're excited to move to this as a new standard going forward. That said, backwards compatibility is important to us. Like Paul said about rolling out slowly on your network, DFP and AdX will also be rolling this out gradually, making sure that you're able to take time to adjust and make changes on your end while being backwards compatible throughout. So as far as what this will actually look like in DFP and AdX going forward, those details are still being ironed out. We'll have a roadmap later this quarter that will explain, when you can expect support for reservation versus programmatic, different creative types, exactly how the behavior will look, and then we're aiming to kind of have our first version of this done around the middle of next year. As with many of your own websites and apps, the concept of fixed sizes is fairly deeply embedded into the DoubleClick serving and UI infrastructure. So we have our work cut out for us as far as making sure that all of the systems from forecasting through reporting through protections, etc., are all kind of in line with this. But we're committed to it.
Thank you, Aaron. That's very reassuring and confidence building, and also it gives you some kind of an understanding to all our audience of a timeline that it's good. It's a good time right now to start implementing and testing a flexible ad containers. So when the ad servers actually deliver in mid 2018, you're ready to actually take on the new functionality and start using end to end, be able to use these ads in a much more robust manner. Okay, so that was about the transition, and then what I also wanted to cover was go a little deeper into the ad portfolio details and talk a little bit about sizes. How do you go about doing flexible sizes? About performance, what it means, and why we have some guidelines that we have to improve the performance of the ad load, and also the experience, the ad experience part. So let's get that started. So on the flexible ad sizing, one of the key themes in the questions is from publishers as well as advertisers, like what is expected of me, what should I do, how should I implement this. So we tried to put that in perspective, and I would ask Matt to help us walk through that, like what are the publisher responsibilities and what are the advertiser responsibilities. Matt, are you on?
Can you hear me, Shelley?
Yep,
There we go.
can hear you.
Okay. Great. So thank you, Shelley, for the opportunity to speak here. So responsive ads has been in the space for quite some time. We've had a lot of experience with both advertising side as well as the publishing side. And so when you think of overall looking at this, the publisher's responsibilities versus the kind of the advertiser's responsibilities are broken up separately. Usually from the standpoint of the publisher, looking at this new aspect ratio, it's really the container. And so as Shelley mentioned on flexible ads, IAB.com, you can get a lot of information on that. But really looking at your spaces now on which spaces are the best for that kind of aspect ratio. Second is, ad size design based on screen. And so the portfolio has been broken up into these different 10 by 1s all the way down to 1 by 1s. But as you can see, there's a 6 by 1 that specifically took the 300 by 50 or the 320 by 50 that was for mobile, whereas the others as well were very much based on the transition. So starting out and looking at those existing sizes that you have and matching them to the flexible sizes is really important. So for instance, a 4 by 1 works very nicely with the 970 by 250. And so the next is really looking at also the managing page layout. When laying out the page, usually setting up the container, you're looking at kind of either a max width and a fixed height, or a fixed height and a max width. And so understanding that, so when the ads load, you're not going to get any page yank. So being able to do a lot of that set up before the actual page loads to make sure that you can avoid some of those issues that might affect the user experience. So really getting that container set up so it can work in both the flexible units and the IAB units. It's good to start with a couple units that really have worked well with you in the fixed sizes, like 970 by 250. From that standpoint, start with the 4 by 1, and then on mobile, looking at something like the 6 by 1, which would be then the 300 by 50 or the 320 by 50. On the buy side or the advertising side, we really have kind of a new design paradigm. So really designing for these ad ranges. We tend to look at it from the standpoint of now you have these proportional sizes that are actually fitting shapes. So if you think of the 10 by 1 as a horizontal, the 1 by 1 is a square, your 16 by 9 or 2 by 1 a landscape, and then the 9 by 16 or the 3 by 4, 1 by 2 a portrait and vertical. So you really need to get in the mindset of laying out from the standpoint of these 5 different shapes that could then fit those different design, those different ad size ranges. In addition to that, build for the ad size themselves. So when thinking of this, looking at the actual K-weight, the maximum that would be the load. So we've always looked at it from the standpoint of starting with the largest size. Good example would be the 4 by 1, which is your 1800 max width, and looking at how you have a K-weight that would actually fit to that size, and then scaling down for some of the smaller sizes. So really looking at it from designing from the larger size downward. And then when it comes to the behavior, there are plenty of commercial tools like us presenters on the call today, but really looking at it from the standpoint that within HTML, you do need to have something that will help in managing that proportional aspect ratio, unless you're actually going to serve only static images. So designing for that aspect ratio and building for that aspect ratio also means that when you have a larger size, making sure the content is very viewable and high quality, and then when you get to the smaller sizes, how does your button, your CTA, the size of the CTA, position of the CTA is also quite important. Again, with responsive ads behavior, responsive ads in this case is really, we're looking at the flexible behavior. And so again, making sure that you have the right HTML structure to do this as part of those builds. And so it moves from swapping out, of course, the different sizes to a single fluid, flexible unit to fit those spaces. And so when it comes to now building this, it's very important that any of the HTML script or anything that you incorporate into the product is actually set up in the container, not to mess with the page elements and try to do things to change the publisher's page, but really work within and keeping this as this flexible unit that all of the code and libraries are contained. And those 5 bullet points from both the publisher side and the advertising side should give you a good understanding. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to the flexibleads.iab.com for more information and see those examples.
Thank you, Matt. Paul, you also have had very good experience for so many years working both with publishers and the advertisers in executing display ads. Do you want to add something to what Matt said?
Yeah, sure, Shaylee. Yeah, so I think this is a massive opportunity for publishers to bring back yield or drive yield. Over the last few years, we've seen a major change in the amount of screen sizes and resolutions, and these old fixed size formats are really not, they're not monetizing to the degree that the publishers need. So think of this as this massive opportunity to drive the future of yield for the publishing industry, and also to leverage your sales teams, your existing sales teams and operations teams to get this new flexible ads movement going, because like we said earlier, that it's not something that will be in programmatic immediately. So the best way for us to drive it forward as fast as possible is through our existing team members and testing. So yeah, Shaylee had mentioned Matt had mentioned we've been working with a number of publishers around the world for the last 6 months to a year, especially on testing a lot of these flexible ad units in different ad servers, including DFP. And it is something that you can do immediately. So there's no DFP and the product team at Google is working on improving the functionality within DFP to support flexible ads, but you can do this immediately with the existing DFP setup. At Flexitive Design Cloud, we've been working with a ton of publishers on executing this.
Thank you, Paul. Anthony, Sam, do you want to add anything?
Hi, this is Sam from Flashtalking. Yeah, to echo what Paul had mentioned earlier, As this is something that seems very unfamiliar to a number of parties in the industry, just to emphasize, this is something that can be done now. But an important aspect of rolling this out across the spectrum is really for what we're asking at Flashtalking of publishers to reach out to us to determine to do testing to make sure that the rollout goes smoothly. If you're interested in beginning to implement flexible ad containers on your sites, we would want to work out some testing to make sure our tags are integrated seamlessly. So that's probably one of the important things that you can do. A little bit of groundwork ahead of hand. So just feel free to reach out to anybody that you're working with and try to get some testing done ahead. So when you actually start launching campaigns, you know everything will work smoothly.
Thank you. Anthony, do you want to add anything?
Shirley, I think the presenters have got it pretty well covered. We're just at Spongecell. We're just really excited about this rollout and making advertising and the publisher experience better.
Thank you. Aaron, do you want to add anything? Any advice for audience here?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Thank you. The next part basically is there's a lot of work done in the working group to look at the page load performance and how the ad loads impact the page load performance and figure out like what's that initial load of the page and what should be the load of the ad in that part of the page load, so that it doesn't disrupt the page load but actually complement the page load. And I would ask Sam to walk us through some details, and Sam helped a lot with testing that.
Sure. Thanks, Shelley. So from the specification that was released, there's a little diagram that kind of helps to explain where we see as the initial load and the subload starting points. And just to kind of break it down, if we look at the lines, the vertical blue line at the left is where the publisher page load is beginning, and then the first green line that you encounter is when the ad load would begin. So that's where you would count off your initial file load. So that would be your initial creative HTML document and whatever assets you need to get an initial render of your creative. And you want to load your creative up to the maximum initial K weight that you're allowed for the initial load, and then the loading of the ad and creative. Hopefully, you'll have enough to work with to begin your the initial part of your creative messaging, and then the publisher page load complete event is the event that the ad should be listening for in order to initialize the ad file subload. The ad file subload is generally where we would relegate heavier, more rich experiences. So after the publisher page load complete event occurs, that's when the secondary load of the ad creative can begin. Things that we're trying to mitigate is really just to improve the user experience throughout all of this. So by breaking up the creative into an initial load and a subload like this, it helps to relieve the number of file requests that occur that might be competing for resources with the publisher's content that the user is trying to access. And it'll also limit the number of render blocking scripts that may be requested that could also delay the publisher content page load time. So if we're looking at things like video, if it could be in the secondary part of a load, and heavier assets like or interactive assets that may be something that occur on user interaction, if those aren't loaded initially, but those are subject to subload file requests. That's the aspect of the creative that we're trying to delay until after the publisher page load complete event has been dispatched.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so the other thing just want to add a little bit here is we also have a whole section on render blocking scripts that typically um, uh, basically block the rendering of the page and should be minimized or avoided for later loads as part of the subload, as well as accessing even like a CSS. We have some recommendations on how you can minimize the impact of accessing external files and what you can do within the ad itself. So please do go look at and read those guidelines. There's a lot of information in there on how to improve the page load performance with your ad. So the next part that we wanted to cover was the user experience part. So one of the first things that we did as part of the working group was to define the non-disruptive ad experiences, which is part of the lean the lean program or lean principles. So we've removed a lot of experiences like pop-up and things that expand automatically without user initiation. That whole list is there in the section on non-disruptive ad experience within the new ad portfolio. Please do go visit that, and it's really easy to adjust your specs and ask advertisers for the right kind of ad experiences. Then the next one is that because of this radical shift to flexible sizing, there are a lot of ads that and ad formats that we have delisted. At the same time, just to give you a little bit background, the whole idea of the new ad portfolio came from an extensive research and survey that we had conducted in 2015. And one of the things there was that to reduce the complexity, we had like 33 ad formats that we were recommending prior to this. And most of the stakeholders and thought leaders from publishers, from ad tech companies, and from ad agencies and advertisers, they basically came back and said, 7 to 10 pretty much covers 90% of their advertising. So it's they asked us to simplify the whole portfolio to a much limited number of ad units. So that's the other thing that we have done. So you'll see a lot of things being delisted. Some things are being put in transition. For example, the Rising Stars, we will stop supporting them in January 2018. We allowed for like 6 months for people to transition out of those. There's a lot of guidance on video, much more nuanced guidance on especially the autoplay videos, the outstream videos that we see a lot more of. There's guidance based on lean principles, when you should download the video file, when you should play the video, when it's viewable. If the video user scrolls out of the video area, then you should, and becomes non-viewable, you should pause the video. There's a lot of guidance on audio, how to handle audio, and we've introduced some couple new concepts like of what does 100% share of screen mean when you can play the audio, provided the user is already listening to device audio, if the device audio is on. And then there's strict guidance around, when there is no 100% share of screen, for example, on a desktop browser, you can never assume 100% share of screen. It will never happen. So you should not be playing audio automatically. So that kind of detailed guidance is there. The guidance as well as the scenarios, and then if you cannot determine audio signal in a device, then you should not play audio automatically to be safe and respectful to the user. There's more guidance, clear guidance on close buttons on when they should always be present, and also we are asking you to use a minimum size of a close button and a standard X for close button. You can add additional text to it, but it's good to standardize that on an X button, so it becomes a very normal clear experience for user on how to exit out of an ad experience. Expanding ads, we've made two major changes. One is we have removed auto expanding out of the portfolio. All expansions should be user initiated actions like a click or a tap or discrete action is required to expand an ad, and then it should always have a close button, so it's very easy for user to exit out of that experience. The other thing we have tried to do is, and mainly looking at like the current major traffic goes through devices, is to simplify the expansions. Like earlier, we had multiple options for expansions that you could expand to the left or to the right, and you could have different sizes. We're trying to simplify that once the user has provided their intent to engage with the ad and expand the ad, give them the full share of the screen, place your ad centrally on the screen and take over the screen and provide a clear close button to exit. Then there's more guidance on animations, mainly around viewability, that run your animations when the ad is viewable. It doesn't help the advertiser if you run your animations when the ad is not viewable. And try to do all the JavaScript for animation, load them as part of the subload rather than the initial load, so that they don't act as render blocking scripts. So that's some highlights of that guidance. And then there's guidance on interstitials. A lot of the interstitials, what is called interstitials today, is actually pop-ups. So we've provided clear guidance on what an interstitial means, that it's when there is it's something that comes in between when a user is navigating between two pieces of content, and that's when you can classify an ad as an interstitial. Everything else is a pop-up or is an overlay ad, which we have delisted, or which we're asking you not to use any ad that overlays content without user's permission. So that's the highlights of the user experience part. And that also brings us to the end of the presentation. We had allocated last 15 minutes of this presentation for question and answers from the audience. Meena, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. So our first question is, can you define DFP initial support for mid-2018, and how can we build Flex now if DFP isn't supporting until mid-2018?
All right, this is Aaron from the Google side. So I can't commit to exactly what it's going to look like in mid-2018 yet. We're still kind of scoping out all the different parts of DFP that will be affected by this. We are looking at, both reservations and programmatic. We're looking at all the different creative types. Like Paul and Matt said, we are trying to take this from, it is you can do this today in a limited way through reservations and programmatic native, but we want to make it first-class citizen the way that fixed sizes are kind of the de facto way of trafficking ads today. We want to support fluid and aspect ratio as the de facto way going forward. As far as what you can do today, so one way is through the native product we have today in DFP and AdX. So the DFP reservations native product is a very flexible, kind of wide open way for you to build and traffic creatives in DFP, use our fluid ad size, and that allows you to serve essentially any arbitrary HTML, CSS, JavaScript, anything you would use to author a creative today. You can use that with kind of native design tactics or not. We've seen publishers and advertisers use it both ways, both as just sort of like a creative authoring, flexible creative authoring tool, and also to create really native experiences. And on the programmatic side, you can traffic native ads that are fluid and adjust to be full width with variable height as well. And those are a bit more restricted from a design standpoint, since they're programmatic and you're getting the creative sight unseen from the buyer. You can also traffic creatives like as I think Paul and Matt were alluding through standard like third-party tags as well. If you serve them outside of a safe frame, then you have the creative can interact with the page, as can like another script running in the head of the page as well, to modify the ad container size. Matt and Paul, if one of you guys wants to jump in and speak to how you recommend doing it for your products, go ahead. But in general, outside of a safe frame, you can have a lot of control over interaction between the ad size and the page.
Yeah, it's Paul from Flexitive here. It really depends on the publisher and the publisher setup. So I just encourage you to reach out to a vendor like us or the others on the call. The idea is that you can do it right now, and we've been testing it over the last 6 months, as I mentioned, with a lot of global publishers. And there is guidance that Shaylee's put together with the IAB Tech Lab that's available on the Flexible Ads site. We're always making improvements to it, so don't expect that is the end state of that guidance. The point is that we can help implement now. It's not something that we could sort of give too much detail on over a call.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes. Yeah, Shelley, I can add to that as well. So as Aaron mentioned, the programmatic side is a little bit more complex due to the delivery into safe frames. And so, the initial step that has been recommended here on this call is really starting direct. So, finding a publisher to work with if you are an agency or brand. And essentially, the idea of setting up, the friendly iframe. So the iframe can be re-rendered to fit that flexible size. And then, from the published perspective, as we did recommend, setting up either the flexible container that actually gives that space. So you either want to set a max width and a fixed height, or you want to do a fixed width and then and then have the height flexible. And so from our perspective, we've been serving into existing IAB slots, so like a 970 by 250. What we'll do is re-render that iframe very similar to the way a pushdown works to actually make it fluid and flexible. And so really nothing needs to be done on the publisher's page today to do this, depending on the provider that you work with. But getting it set up so that it could be more scalable, working with the existing fixed sizes, is to really look at something like the IAB container, or from your own side to look at how you want those spaces set up. Setting up those div containers, either having it so that it's flexible to push down, and so if you have a max width, so it goes edge to edge, understanding that the page will get pushed down, and you will have that that flexibility in that side of it. Okay. So that's how we've been recommending publishers to move forward.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, just wanted to add one last bit. Like you heard from Aaron and Paul and Matt, like there are multiple ways that you can do now, and like as Aaron said, that soon it's going to become, and they'll give the timeline later, but it's going to become a first-class citizen. And so I again want to stress that this is a good time to start testing and be ready when it becomes a first-class citizen in the ad servers.
And really, just to add to that, I think these haven't just been tested, because I think we've been sort of using that word frequently, but we've actually had live campaigns running millions of impressions across the world with responsive ad products. And one ad product that's been possible is also responsive wallpapers. So one of the issues with wallpapers is that they're often fixed sizes and they get cut off on different screen resolutions, or even just with a browser that's a different size on the screen. So it's a good way to improve those fixed wallpapers with responsive. And often we're doing that through a 1x1. So the old 1x1 ad pixel that publishers used to use for the pop-ups that are now being deprecated. You can actually use it to push a third-party tag into a wallpaper ad unit space.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Mina, do you have more questions?
Yep. So our next question is, are there any publisher sandboxes that advertisers can use to test Flex ads?
I'll take that. So I don't have a published list yet. I know like a lot of publishers have contacted me, but I don't want to speak on their behalf and disclose things when they have not disclosed it as public. But feel free to contact me, and I will try to get you in touch with publishers who I know have done some testing, and we can get you help with testing those.
Our next question is, has there been thought to changing the 15-second animation limit? It seems like with the emphasis on subloading, we should be allowed more animation time to accommodate load structure.
No, so we are sticking with the 15-second. Although you have like the subload, we are asking you to do this in the subload. But I think based on testing, the kind of assets and all that you need, still demand a 15-second. Though on user initiation, like you could extend that animation via user interaction in the ads.
Can you discuss the ad choice enabled element within the lean specs? Is the position that all ads need to be ad choice enabled regardless of whether or not behavioral targeting is leveraged for that ad?
I will have to get back to you on that, whether we recommend using ad choices all the time. It's possible that one particular ad may not be using behavioral targeted, but other campaigns may be using it. I can take that question, Mina, and reply directly to that specific case where you're not enabling behavioral targeting, should you have ad choices enabled or not.
Okay, next question is, if we have a creative built that has a large file size built to be served in both large and small size formats, will publishers encounter load issues if that creative is intended to be scaled down to smaller ad slots?
I think if, and Paul and Matt, like maybe you can help me, or Anthony or Sam, like as long as you stick to the file weight limits, it should not be a problem. And the flexible ad container is implemented correctly to scale the assets up or down, it should not create a problem. Anthony, Sam, any additional comments on that?
I think I've gotten this question in the past, and I believe that within the spec, the size range is actually, it helps clarify things a little bit, because sometimes the columns for the size range and the max K weight range is overlooked, and that kind of helps place what types of screen sizes we would be working with. So it's less likely that you would encounter an issue where you're designing and building for a very large screen and then serving to a much smaller screen size, because the size range is actually defined, the smallest and the largest.
Okay, thank you,
Just
Sam.
to add into that, so it's Paul from Flexitive. So the idea is that depending on the viewport or the view of the size of the ad, the right size images will display on load. So if you're calling a large format ad, it'll only call the image components for that large format. If it's calling into a small format within the same aspect ratio, it will call those smaller file sizes. And then if the user loads, say on a desktop, into a large format ad and then adjusts the browser size down to a smaller unit, it won't reload any more images. It will just keep the original large image components and scale them down, because there's no need to. Depending on how you've built the creative or what platform you use. Some platforms like ours actually scales it up or down. So if you load the initial small ad and you increase the size of it, it will detect that increased size and swap it out with larger, higher quality image components. But yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Mina, how many more questions do we have? We're pretty much at the end in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, we still have a bunch more. So I guess we could do one or two more.
Yep.
All right, so how does this move toward flexible ad sizes affect the workflow for advertisers that want to run static display banners? And will HTML5 and static display be siloed into two distinct buckets of inventory?
That's a good question. I think you would not. It depends on how you want to. Depends from company to company how they structure it. But the way I see it, like from a industry level, it's not really the bucket of inventory wouldn't be HTML5 or static image. The bucket of inventories would still run the way they run today, like based on the ad sizes. So yeah, if you look at these specs, there's still very distinct ad units. There's although the size within that and the way that it renders is fluid, but the ad unit is still a discrete, very distinct ad unit, like a 6x1 or 8x1, and that's how the inventories would get bucketed. You may serve an HTML5 ad into that, or you may serve a static image display ad into that particular ad unit. One more question, Nina.
All right, this question's for Aaron. Does Google plan to support Flex ad sizes on web, mobile, or both? And is there any information on support and current authoring tools for the Flex formats, specifically on Google Web Designer?
So to answer the first question, both. We, as many of you are thinking more mobile first these days, but in general, we intend to support it fully on both platforms. As for Google Web Designer, I'm starting to have conversations with that team now, but I can't speak for them right now, unfortunately.
Mina, do you have questions from the audience?
Yes, I do. So our first question is, a lot of publishers take really long to load their sites due to the amount of content. Based on the initial load, what is the expectation of what needs to be seen in the ad?
Paul, Sam, anyone wants to take this? Or I think the question is basically about, what do you show in the initial load if you have to wait 2, 3, 4 seconds for the site to complete its load?
And I think it's Paul here. I mean, I think it really is up to the designer. But I think my approach would be to create something that communicates some kind of message in the initial load, so it can stand alone. Because ultimately, that person may scroll down, while the subload is loading. I mean, it's a possibility, but it really depends on the creative execution. I mean, you may want to have a teaser that teases the user to wait for the end message. It's just really up to the risk you want to take on the creative execution.
Just want to add also, if you look at the file weights, they're actually quite generous for you to be able to show a full, fill any of those ad units at any of the size ranges with a pretty nice either a static image or even some additional CTA buttons and other smaller assets.
It's a really good point, Shelly. Yeah, I mean, they're not, especially on the larger formats. There should be enough space to still do do some solid animation, and the subload is where there's just a lot more flexibility to have more content.
Yeah, next question.
All right, our next question is, does moving render blocking scripts to the subload mean that things like double verify brand safety blocking won't be triggered before the initial ad load?
I'll take that. So no. So the file weight limits that we have provided right now are only for the creative files, the files that are used for creative rendering of the ad. It does not include the files that come from verification providers or other things. We have a item for a follow-up project to define an additional guidance on that, which will probably happen in 2018. But for now, those are allowed in addition to the file width limits, and they can happen in the they need to happen in the initial load.
Our next question is, can rich media be lean, and is that the expectation?
Yes. So Paul, Matt, like I believe you have a lot more experience than me in the rich media part.
I think Matt may have dropped off. Yeah, I think, I mean, the opportunity in this new spec is that on click or tap, you can have unlimited data. So rich media is really in this new spec is really given a lot more freedom. So whether you want to have an expandable format that expands to the full screen, or and have video components or interactive components, you can really engage with the user for as long as they're willing to engage with that creative. So it's really good news for rich media.
Thank you. Yeah, Meena, go ahead.
Sure. So why is DFP the only publisher-side ad server mentioned? Do you know of any other pub-side ad servers that can run responsive creative direct?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So in we've tested with more ad servers, just that DFP is a very popular one, so we kind of use that as an example and set up our tests on those. But if you see the test that I showed, especially on the publisher side of the pages that I showed, there were at least 3 other ad servers that we used in that testing to serve all of those. So there was Smart Ad Server. There was another one from EU region. I'm forgetting the names right now on top of my head, but there were 3 other ad servers that we tested with.
We've heard that DFP can't serve an interstitial while navigating through content. We hope maybe serving the ad on a second impression may resolve this, but this doesn't seem possible in DFP either. Could you advise on this?
I know. I wish Aaron was here to answer that for DFP, but I don't know if that is true because DFP doesn't care what placement you're running, right? It's going to serve a full screen ad when you ask it to serve for a full screen ad. So the placement, which is when you make the ad request, is a publisher's choice. Is that correct assumption, Paul or Sam?
I mean, I'm not sure what the use case is, but I mean, I know that that DFP wouldn't be able to create an interstitial as such, but the publisher can create an interstitial page that, to your point, can call any DFP ad, whether it's a 1x1 out of a 1x1 or a specific size. So it may just be that that's the confusion. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking, that you could create like a ad and then it's up to the placement, like how do you call that ad when you make that ad request.
Our next question is, there are 2 ways to tell the iframe about resizing. Is there an API on the ad server side to handle this and control the creative, or is it meant to be coded into the creative itself?
Could you repeat that, Meena? I didn't catch the first part.
There are 2 ways to tell the iframe about resizing. Is there an API on the ad server side to handle this and control the creative, or is it meant to be coded into the creative itself?
Okay. Matt, do you want to answer that?
Hey, Shaylee, this is Sam. From our perspective, the ad server would be handling that aspect, and for the creative, you would just want to be building your creative ad document to 100%.
Okay.
Do that. I think that I'm not sure if I can speak to other platform vendors, but that's how we would be handling it.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to this. Matthew Snyder here. Yeah, I just got cut off. Sorry about that. I had a bad internet connection. So today the ad server is not controlling the iframe. In most programmatic cases, it's a safe frame, so it's not manipulative. But in the case of different creative formats such as push downs and others, they've been done from the creative. But I believe that this is going to be part of the discussion we'll hear more of from Google when we have the Flex incorporated into DFP. We'll see a lot more of iframe manipulation, similar to what they're doing with programmatic native and others. So it's going to be interesting to see what they bring out. From our perspective, we've been handling it from the creative, but we have seen ad servers that do it. I don't think there is a, either it's if it's done, if it's sold direct and you do it from the creative side, that's a very powerful way to do it. I think when it becomes if the iframe is manipulated from the ad server when the creative comes in, then there is a risk that there could be confrontation on the page. So it's more so in setting up what sizes you want. And so the ad server today, the third party Google GPT actually does that with the responsive ads configuration. So you'll have a 970 by 250, you put all the different sizes in there, and then the iframe is dynamically changed those sizes. But in terms of that flexible shape, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Google there, for sure.
Thank you, Matt. We have one space for one last question if there's more, Meena.
How does the new ad portfolio guidance align with the Coalition for Better Ads?
Yeah, so we are completely aligned with the Coalition for Better Ads. In fact, if you look at the non-disruptive user experience, it's completely aligned with what the Coalition for Better Ads is recommending. Though I just want to point out some subtle differences. One is the CBA guidance is largely based on the data on the mobile, like the browsers, on desktop browser and a mobile browser, whereas we have looked at a more holistic approach to it by looking at not just the browsers, but also the in-app experiences, where you see a lot of new and different experiences, and that's why you might see more guidance from us and more details around executions and some subtle differences. That's I think the core differences, which may appear different, but mostly it's aligned on pretty much everything. Yeah, so there's a couple of the questions that we did not have immediate answer. We will reach out to the people who asked the questions directly. Also on the IAB.com/new ad portfolio, I'm maintaining an FAQ. So we're gonna, as we get questions that we think are meaningful for everybody to know, like especially from this webinar, we will keep adding them to those FAQs. So you can keep visiting that, periodically to check that some of your questions may have been answered there. Once again, I want to thank all the speakers and all of the companies that participated in this. Have worked extensively over the last 1 year in testing. So if you're planning to transition or started planning to test, please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with them. And we have test tags for testing and everything to help you with this transition. And once again, I want to thank all the audience for joining us here today and for all the questions. Thank you very much. And let's come to the end for this session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Shaylee. Thank you, guys.